Welcome to the Power, Peace, and Purpose podcast, where midlife isn't a slow fade out, but your greatest glow up yet. I'm Angelina, your hype woman, your truth teller, and I'm here to educate so that you can advocate. Let's get into it. So this is our first episode, which means I'm going to sit here and talk about myself for a while, and I promise you I'm not going to bore you to tears because really nothing about my life has been boring. I was born in 1976. I have an identical twin sister, and my mom decided when we were 3 years old to split town. So that means I was raised by my father, who was a police officer, and my grandmother, who was, an old lady. Now, why does any of that matter for this podcast? Well, it matters because I grew up without a mom. I had my grandmother, sure, but anyone who's raised by an elderly lady knows that it's not quite the same as having a mom that is closer in age. So I was raised without a mother, and it made me someone who is super nurturing. My grandmother really nurtured my twin sister and I. Therefore, that's all that I ever knew was to be a nurturer. Why is that important for you? It's important for you because I want you to understand that everything I bring to the table, whether it's in a podcast, my courses, one-on-one coaching, or my videos on TikTok, everything that I bring to the table for you is about nurturing you to be your better self. I'm an educator so that you can advocate for a better life for yourself. I want to share my journey through midlife and perimenopause because it's really important. I want you to understand who you're listening to and who you may ultimately decide to work with one day. So it all started back in 2017 when I was then 41 years old. My then husband and I, with our 3 kids, moved across the country to his hometown. So I was uprooted from everything I ever knew about being a mother, all of my friends, all of my community, and I moved to this city where I knew no one. Soon thereafter, we separated. It was really messy. It was not a clean, simple divorce. It was really hard. I will go into that on lots of future episodes, but this episode today, we're just going to focus on the midlife part of it. Back in 2017, I started to change. Now, I didn't realize back then that I was starting to go through perimenopause, that my hormones were completely out of whack. I thought that my struggles were only because of my failing and then failed marriage. I really had no idea that what was affecting me as a whole person was really perimenopause. Now, I am not in any way saying that perimenopause was the cause of my divorce. There were definitely other factors involved, but I didn't know at the time for myself that all the struggles I was experiencing were in part due to perimenopause. So I went from being a stay-at-home mom, loving life, to having to go back into the workforce. That in itself was pretty tragic for me. I loved being a stay-at-home mom. That was really difficult for me and my children because they only ever knew me as being available for them 24/7. So that was a really hard transition. Going through that transition, I had a lot of anger, a lot of rage. I cried a lot. I was angry all the time. Now, remember, at this point in time, I don't know that I'm experiencing perimenopause. I just think that it's my divorce and moving to a new city and not knowing anyone. And then the hot flashes started. I, again, am not making any correlation to menopause or perimenopause because in my mind, what I knew about menopause is it was for older ladies. 41 to me was not old. I was expecting to maybe start feeling menopause symptoms later when I was in my 50s, mid 50s or 60s. But sure enough, it hit me in my early 40s. I had my first hot flash in the DMV. And when I tell you that there was a moment where I was fine, and then the very next second I was not, that is exactly what happened. I'm standing in line. All of a sudden, I get this major headache. My body feels like it's turning from the inside out, and it feels like somebody set me on fire. I started sweating. My heart started palpitating, and I thought I was going to throw up. But the weirdest part about that hot flash is that I got super angry and irritable. I mean, I was looking around at everyone thinking, now I know why these places always get so much hate. I just did not want to be in there. So I dealt with that hot flash, and then a few more happened throughout the year, and definitely night sweat. The night sweats, I thought, was based on anxiety because, of course, as you can imagine, going through a divorce, moving to a new city, not knowing anybody, also having to go back into the workforce, I for sure had a ton of anxiety. I thought that my night sweats were completely due to anxiety. I would wake up in the middle of the night. My heart would be pounding out of its chest. When I tell you that if I could scoop up water off of my chest and pour it in a glass, I could. That's how sweaty I was. I'm thinking it's all anxiety, probably related to my relationship issues. So I decided to join a gym and work out to ease all of my stress. That worked for a short period of time. I did start to feel better, but then the stress of the types of workouts I was doing really negatively impacted my body. My joints, my back pain, I was pulling muscles left and right. My back was going out once every 4 or so months. It just became this chronic issue where every time I got ready to pick up a barbell, in the back of my mind, I was thinking, oop, your back is going to go out. You know this. This is how it works. And then it got to the point where getting out of bed, rolling off the bed, my hips would hurt, my joints would hurt. I would lay in bed sometimes and my joints would be on fire and in so much pain. And again, I'm chalking everything up to stress and anxiety. Then the major depression started. And when I tell you, it got to the point where I could not even get myself up out of bed most days. There was even one night when my kids were at their dad's house. I was so deeply depressed that I was laying on the kitchen floor. I was just laying there. And I don't even know how long I laid there. I just laid there contemplating my life. How did I get here? How am I going to get out of this spot? Am I going to ever make friends again? Am I ever going to be happy again? Am I ever going to be in love again? It was a really dark time. That kitchen floor night happened so many times. And it was not just the kitchen floor. Sometimes it was the sofa. Sometimes it was the shower. Sometimes it was my closet. I remember even laying on the floor beside my bed one night because I couldn't bring myself to get in the bed. Then, behind the depression, I started drinking. Not just a little glass of wine here and there. I'm talking a bottle of wine a day. Then when that didn't help me feel better anymore, I took it up a notch. A bottle and a half, and then 2 bottles. And I was drinking so much that I was in this deadly loop of alcohol addiction. I tried different remedies. I tried using an app. I tried charting. I tried meditating. I tried even manifesting myself out of alcohol addiction, but I couldn't do it. I was really struggling. I still don't know that perimenopause is one of the underlying culprits. I think in my mind, I'm broken. I don't know how to deal with life. And then I started feeling shame and guilt, so much shame for how much I was drinking, so much guilt for how I'd turned from being a wonderful stay-at-home mom who cooked every meal, everything was always clean, laundry was always done, to I would wear the same clothing for days on end. Then it got to the point where I noticed I was only making mac and cheese for my kids or mac and cheese and chicken nuggets. And then it went from mac and cheese and chicken nuggets to only fast food. All the while, I'm still drinking. I'm still eating very poorly. I'm definitely not hydrating. Hydration for me only came in the form of a red wine bottle. And around this time, my relationships started falling apart. Definitely my relationship with myself because I hated myself in those days. I would wake up in the mornings thinking, well, and actually I would say it out loud sometimes, I hate my life. I hate my life. And I would just sometimes wake up and be like, ugh, I can't believe I'm still alive. By now in my story, it's about 3 years later. So around 2020, and then the pandemic started. So in addition to the shame, the guilt, feeling overworked, not understanding what's going on with my body, not having any idea how I'm going to get back to being the happy, social, loving person that I used to be, COVID happened. So then you take the wine that I was already drinking, the bad food that I was eating, and just dial that up a notch. Entering perimenopause, not knowing it, and having a pandemic happen at the same time while you have 3 young children who can't go to school, they ended up staying with me full time. That was a trifecta of stress. I was overwhelmed. I was overworked. I didn't know how to homeschool my kids. Their grades were suffering. The girls were with me full time because their dad had to go to his job. Everybody's looking at me, and I started feeling more guilt, more shame, being judged because the girls' grades were slipping and they're not doing as well in school as they used to be. The weight started piling on. Now, I'm only 5'1", so I'm a shorty. And if you're a shorty, you know that if we gain 2 pounds, it looks like 20. If you are taller, say 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, you can gain 2 pounds and nobody would ever know. You could probably even gain 20 pounds and it wouldn't be as drastic. I started gaining weight and I ended up gaining 30 pounds. Now, over the last several years, I seesawed up and down. I would lose 10, gain 15, lose 15, gain 10. It just went up and down, up and down. All the while, I still don't know that I'm in the throes of perimenopause. My hormones, and now I found out my thyroid were completely gutted. So I got in touch with a primary care physician. She did some lab work, told me everything was normal and that maybe my kidneys and my liver were a bit elevated, but here's some Wellbutrin to take care of the depression and call her again in a year. I said to her, I really feel like there's something else going on because I can feel the inside of my body feeling sick. Now, she did talk to me about alcohol, and I decided, okay, well, yes, I need to start making some cuts. So I did. I was able to scale back tremendously. Now, how I was able to almost virtually cut alcohol out of my life, that is definitely for another podcast, and it has a really happy ending, and I can't wait to share that with you. But let's get back to this important matter at hand. In that office visit with my general doctor, she did not say a single thing to me about perimenopause. And my age at that time is what, let's see, 46, 47, something like that. The more you get to know me, you know that I suck at math. So if you ever hear me get numbers wrong, please don't hold it against me. At any rate, I'm in my late 40s. Nothing was ever said to me about perimenopause or menopause. So I go on to struggle for another year. And then I finally go in to see my gynecologist because I was having some issues. In that appointment, I said, hey, by the way, for years I've been having these hot flashes at night. It's anxiety. Can you give me some Xanax? And she said, well, I mean, that's really something you should see a psychiatrist for. And she said, by the way, you're describing different symptoms to me, so it pretty much seems like you're in menopause. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? I'm in my late 40s. What are you talking about? That's not supposed to happen until you're like 50s or mid 50s or even 60s. And she said, well, it can happen earlier. And I was like, okay. So that's good to know. Now what? What do we do? And she goes, oh, well, welcome to menopause. And I was like, wait, what do you mean? She was like, well, you're telling me everything that leads to menopause. So this is just kind of like the next part of your life. And I said, wait, are you saying that the way my life is going right now, the way I feel inside my body, outside my body, mentally, spiritually, physically, everything, that is my new normal? And she said, yes. And I thought, well, this can't be. And I said, well, why don't we do some blood work? I'd like to know kind of what my hormone levels are. And at this point, when I say hormone levels at this appointment, I'm only thinking about estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen and progesterone were the only two hormones on my mind. I had no idea we had more than that. And I sure the hell didn't know we even have testosterone. More on that later. She looks at me and says, look, I don't need to draw blood work to know that you're in menopause. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to argue with her. I said, well, what can you give me? Can you give me anything for it? I had heard about HRT before. I'd heard the acronym HRT on a podcast, and it stands for hormone replacement therapy, if you didn't know. And I said, well, what about HRT? And she was like, well, I guess I can just write you a script for it. And I said, yes, I would like that. Because if I'm in menopause and HRT is supposed to help me, then I want that. So she wrote a prescription for me, and I took that for a year. The kind of HRT she gave me was progesterone with the estradiol. Fast forward an entire year. I am still struggling with my weight. It doesn't matter how hard I diet or exercise, my weight is not regulated. Everything I put in my mouth, and when I tell you that I could eat one dill pickle chip and gain 3 pounds, that's the damn truth. I was also still so anxiety riddled. I was still having a few hot flashes, not as many as before, but I was still having them. Heart palpitations. I was agitated and irritated and aggravated all the time. Even with my youngest daughter, who was super, super, super affectionate, it even got to the point where if she would come up to hug me, I would kind of have to like brace myself. And that is the opposite of the woman I have ever been, especially to my children. But the hardest part of all of this, selfish to say, was the weight. I always thought in the back of my mind, if I could just lose this last 20, 15, 30, wherever I was at the moment, pounds, I would be happier. And then all of these other things would go away. I wouldn't be uncomfortable with being touched anymore. I would not have all this anger. I would not be stressed out. I wouldn't have all this anxiety. I just thought it was all about weight. Now, let's back up to just a few months ago. I had finally reached my limit. I was like, I can't do this anymore. It all changed when my youngest daughter came to me crying, asking me where her mother went. She said, "Where is my mom? You aren't her. What happened to her?" And she wasn't saying you, she was saying her. And it broke my heart and it changed my life. The very next morning, I was sitting in the bathroom on the toilet and I was thinking about what she said to me and was trying to hold back all these tears. And I thought, you still have 30 to 40 years left to live. And look at what you've become. Like, how did you get here? How did you get to this point where you're suffering so much and you're not doing anything about it? And listen, I'm a Gen Xer. I was born in 1976. If you are Gen Xer, you know we are a different breed. We have grit. And I wasn't using my grit for anything. So I decided, that's it. I've had enough. I don't want to be this person anymore. And I certainly want my daughter to have her mom back. So I got online, did some Google searches, and I quickly found a place called Revive Lifestyle Medicine. It's just around the corner from my house. In fact, when I called them, I said, well, can you tell me where you're located? I don't know why I didn't decide to use Google Maps. But when they told me their location, I was like, dude, that's 1 mile from my house. I pass this location every single day for the last 4 or 5 years. And I've seen the sign before. The biggest part of their sign is called Revive, and I didn't really think much about it. That place and the nurse practitioner that I'm now working with, she's a hormone specialist, has completely changed my life. In the first appointment that I had with Revive, the first thing the nurse practitioner said was, we're going to do a full panel. And I was like, okay, but every time I get these done, it always says normal. And she looked at me like I had two heads and said, well, you mean like in the normal range? I said, yeah, like the normal range. Like the only thing that's ever elevated is maybe my kidneys and liver. And I said, that's probably because at the time I was drinking more than I should. And she kind of giggled and said, well, the normal range is just a statistical average. It's not your normal. I said, wait, what? She said, that's not your specific normal. That's just statistics. She said, it's not your optimal. You're here because you want to live an optimal life, right? And I was like, yes, absolutely. Well, she said, well, then we need to do a full panel. That one comment that she made me so angry and so happy at the same time. I was angry that I'd never heard that before, that I thought that lab results were about me. And I was happy that I'd finally found someone who gave so much of a shit that she was actually going to turn my life around with these labs. It was just such a pivotal moment. And I promise you there's going to be a podcast on hormone levels because what I learned about my own labs turned everything about my life upside down. And this was the time in my life when everything needed to be turned upside down. The lab results and what I've learned since has taken me from being 1 foot in the grave to wanting to do so much with my life and with my kids that I literally wake up excited, happy, energized, full of love, full of mission, full of wanting to share, full of wanting to communicate and collaborate, full of energy, full of everything. That's why I'm so excited that you have decided to listen to this podcast and hopefully join me on my journey to educate you so that you can advocate for yourself. And I promise that on future podcasts, I'm not going to talk about myself so much. If you did stick around with me for this podcast for the whole thing, thank you so much. I'm so happy that you decided to do so. Also want to mention, I founded a sisterhood. It's called Peri Sisterhood. It's a sisterhood of like-minded women who are in midlife, We're going through all these struggles and challenges. We might as well do it together. If you need community or you want resources and to learn different things about what comes with midlife and how we can not only deal with it, but have another glow up. We're not too old to have another glow up. You can have as many glow ups in your life as you want to. But if you feel like your life needs to be turned upside down, if you need sisterhood, please join me on the Tri-Peri Sisterhood. It's free to join. There are a lot of free resources there. There are, of course, paid services and events like my coaching and educational webinars, but to join the sisterhood is free. So that does it for today's episode. Join me tomorrow where we talk about more things midlife. And as a special thank you for hanging on with me for so long today and listening to me talk about myself, go to seasonsofhercoaching.com and grab some free resources. Also, if this podcast resonated with you, please leave a review and share this out with your network, your friends, your sisters, your mothers, your aunts, your cousins, your friends, even the ones you don't like right now. They might be in perimenopause. You never know. Share it with everyone you know. It would mean the world to me and the world to them. You've been listening to the Power, Peace, and Purpose podcast from Seasons of Her. Remember, I'm here to educate and guide you, but you are the one in control. You are the leader of your own transformation. Every choice you make moves you closer to your power, your peace, and your purpose.